Hello guys, today I'm going to show you 3 ways to improve your animation. So these are things that you can generally do for any kind of hand-drawn animation. It should be able to help you. These are methods that I've developed myself, so they're a little bit unique, but I think that other animators do them in their own kind of ways. I wouldn't do this to polished animation, but like in your rough stage of animation, this is when you want to start putting these in, when you're doing the keyframes and stuff. First one is scrubbing for timing and spacing adjustments. I'm going to explain to you what it is. So scrubbing is a really important concept in frame-by-frame animation. In traditional animation, this would be a bit like rolling, when you're rolling the paper. So I've got a sample scene set up here, one of my old animations from years ago. The timing and the spacing, I'll tackle the timing first, okay? So right now I'll show you what we've got. We've got this bird. You might have seen it in my show reel. So it's quite a long sequence of this bird flying and then eventually kind of disintegrating into feathers. Just want you to pay attention to this layer here. We've got it on 1s, 2s and 3s, mostly 2s and 3s. And this is a perfect stage for affecting the timing of it. The timing is quite clean when it comes to drawing because you don't actually need to alter anything to do with the actual drawings. So I really like timing if I don't want to affect a drawing or something. It usually goes hand in hand with affecting the spacing. What we're trying to do, we're trying to make these fast areas of movement a little bit faster, and we're trying to make the slow areas a little bit more slow. It makes things less like just all boring movement where it's all just we're just going along and everything's just the same pace, and instead it really livens up the animation a lot. So here we've got the bird kind of coming into, morphing into the frame and then slowing down. We could just push that a little bit more, move some of these frames along. These are the key frames here on the black dots. We're going to move some of these along, and every now and then we're going to just play it and scrub it along so we can see what's happening. It's important to press play because then you're seeing it at the frame rate that it is instead of scrubbing forward. I'm going from having it on 1s onto 2s, then 3s, then 4s. That's the kind of natural progression. Already that's starting to look better, I think. You can just make subtle changes like this. You see how quick that was, and I didn't have to go and draw or anything. It's made it a lot more appealing to the eye. It's grabbing your attention more because you're just going very fast and then very slow. I don't know what it is, but it appeals to our sense of aesthetics. Do this before you've put it onto 1s, because otherwise you might be wasting quite a lot of time doing in-betweens that you don't need. So if I had in-betweened those when they were on 2s, I would have had to just delete those drawings. If you put this in on your rough kind of keyframe animation, you'll be saving yourself a lot of time in the long run because you won't be making any unnecessary in-betweens. You can see what I've done here. I've just made this part much faster than it was and made this part slow down a lot more. The timing would be more like that. So the spacing, it kind of goes hand in hand with the timing, but instead of it being with the frames, now we're going to be looking at the stage. So we can see here what we would want is to move these to be a bit more separated. The more kind of separated they are in relation to each other, the faster they'll appear to go. Maybe like that. We're going to try and do that. So that's what I'm just doing. I'm just going through bit by bit. You've got to be watching out for these inconsistencies. This might take a bit of thought at first, but after a while you're going to find that this is just becomes instinct. Now when you're able to get this to be an instinctual thing that you do, it's going to be effortless to make something look good as an animation. So that's what you're aiming for. Using essentially the full stop and the comma buttons to move it, but I've got that on my slider on the tablet. So that's how it's basically like rolling on a light box. We're basically nudging this this frame closer to the frame in front of it. You see there? And that's kind of creating this easing effect. I'm going to do the same for this one. It's a little bit more, you know, tricky. It can get a little bit more messy because you're going to have to correct the frames themselves. You know, you might have to draw and stuff, but when you use both of them, that's when it's most effective. If you're doing a character, you could do it with just the arm or something. So that was scrubbing for timing and spacing adjustments. Another scrubbing exercise you can do, this is the second point, scrubbing for arc adjustments. Almost everything seems to follow an arc. Every kind of natural movement seems to have some kind of arc built into it. You want to make sure that anything in your frame is following that arc when you're creating hand-drawn animation. Here's another example. So here's like some keyframes I'm working on for an animation test. So as I'm scrubbing through, you can see the character moving. And this is a very kind of gestural animation. So this one has a lot of arcs in there. Wherever I miss out the arc, it's going to look unnatural. So I need to scrub along here and just check that things are following an arc. This can be quite easy when it's plainly set out in 2D. Check especially with pivots, by the way, because that's where it's most common. The arc is where it swings outwards. Now the mistake is when an animator will go straight from there to there, and that often happens in the in-betweens. If you have this but it's in kind of 3D perspective, so if this is like at a weird perspective like that, then it's quite hard to take into account where you put the arc, you know? That can be quite difficult. So there you might accidentally think that it's there when in fact it's there. Perspective can really mess up your perception of where arcs are, and that's something that you just have to kind of learn. Okay, let's go back to this. So here, if I was doing so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to scrub through. I'm at quite an early stage in this, so maybe I won't find anything. What I'm doing right now to look for them, I'll scrub for this section, and for this one I will look specifically at the shoulders. So I can see inconsistencies there, but that's more to do with the proportions and the form. What I'm looking for is arc adjustments for this one. So I would go in and then do that. But this is a really good method, and this is how you really check for things like that, is you just scan the body. So this time when we scrub, we'll look at both of the feet. Actually, let's just say we'll look at this foot. So we're just focusing on this foot as we're scrubbing through. Now it's very minor, but I think that this one here is not following the arc perhaps. This one is frame 1, this is the foot at frame 2, and this is the foot at frame 3. I'm kind of getting a feeling for where the arc is by scrubbing through. Like, scrubbing through for me helps me to find where the arc is. If you have trouble finding the arc, or you want a more precise definition, what you can do is this. We're going to make a new layer, and then here we're going to go through the keyframes and plot every point where a specific point is. So this one I'm going to make it the ankle. So go there, go there. So this only works for a specific point. So now what we would do is we would try and link them up. So we'll draw a curve, and we'll try and draw a curve through. This one happens to be quite a subtle curve actually. But now that we've drawn the curve which has linked up the dots. Every drawing we make in the in-betweens or anything has to be on that curve. You see how it's tracking that area, this foot here. Maybe it's too small and that's the problem, but it should be out just a little bit more. So it should be maybe there, and you'll come across it by scrubbing and focusing on a specific area. So if you scrub and you're not focusing on anything in particular, it will probably just look very pleasant. If you scrub and you focus on an area, all of a sudden you're gonna see what is wrong with that area. I'm like illuminating here all the mistakes I'm making in my animation, but I do this all the time. I'm always looking for the mistakes. Number 3 is maintaining proportions in straight ahead animation. I do believe that straight ahead animation in general does look a little bit more authentic and nice than pose to pose animation. It just has a quality about it that's a little bit better. But the main problem is that proportions are really difficult to maintain. This is a method for maintaining the proportions in straight ahead animation. You got to check the proportions against other proportions in the body. So the head is a certain size relative to the body is a certain size relative to the legs. If a solid object is not moving on the z-axis, aka towards or away from the camera, it should stay the same size. You can check this by duplicating the original object and matching it to other frames. So now we're going to do the head. So if we just focus on the head, we can see here, while I'm playing that through, you can see it quite clearly. Once we focus on it, the head is smaller, even though the head is not going that far back or forward in the frame according to the camera. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take my lasso tool and I'm just going to scale it to what I think is the same. And you might have to ripple edit because these things happen over a few frames quite a lot of the time. So the other method, this seems to work quite well if you've got construction lines like I do. So right now I've been using this kind of circle as a construction line for the head. Let's say the starting frame or the frame that you think is a perfect example of how the proportions should be for the head. And this is assuming that your character is not moving towards the frame or away from the frame. Trace over that circle construction, and now we know that that's basically the size of the circle which the head is built around. So now we can copy that, put it on a layer of its own, and then we move it on top of the other frames. So far so good, that's about right. Okay, so this one, it's a little bit big, it might be worth changing. Go onto the layer, draw in where that circle should be so that we know. It's a bit time consuming, but it is a way to improve your animation so that proportionally it's a bit more sound. This one's a bit big, so what we can do here is just take that and just scale it just slightly down. You'll be able to fix any proportion problems. By the way, if you have an animation which has either comes towards you or goes away from you in perspective, and you want to check the proportions, you're going to have to do that relative to the other body parts. So here, I just want to bring your attention to the waistline. So this waistline here, and we're going to look at how it just kind of drifts about the place and doesn't really know where it is, because from drawing to drawing, I put it in the wrong place. So you can see here that it's quite low, and then it goes higher, and then it goes lower, and then it kind of just wobbles around a bit. So once I've brought your attention to this waist, you can see it really easily, right? So you've got to kind of scrub and scan your character animation for each segment of your character. So yeah, we've basically just fixed a segment of our animation. And I want to do these kind of things before I go on to the in-betweening, You want to kind of get those things out the way before you make any more drawings. I would advise not to stick too rigidly to shapes because it will reduce the expressiveness of your animation. You want there to be a little bit of give here. You don't want them to be too rigid in their shapes. At least if you're going for a similar style to what I am, it's nice to have a little bit of change in there. And in fact, if you can intentionally change the shapes and proportions of your animation, then it can create some amazing effects. But you've got to do it intentionally. Okay, it's time for the animation spotlight of the week. This is where I pick one of my subscribers to feature near the end of a video. This week I'm featuring Average Organism. He's a self-taught animator. He's been learning part-time for 5 to 6 years, and he likes to learn animation by slowing down animes frame by frame to study it. He's been working really hard on this animation for over a year now, and it's currently unreleased to the public, but he's agreed to let me show some of it here. I'm really impressed with the quality of the work. Very ambitious moves where he's like actually rotating it in 3D space. I feel like he's getting very close to the actual quality of a fight cutscene that I would see in Naruto, which is like really impressive for a young animator who's self-taught. If you'd like to have a spotlight of your own, just send me your work to be featured in a future video. You can be of any ability level or any style, and I'll just pick one. That's it for the different ways that you can improve your animation. So if you want to talk more about this, if you want to share your different methods, or you want to read about other people's methods, we're going to be discussing it on the Animator Guild forum. So check the links in the description and go over there. It's a great place to hang out, to show your work, and to meet up with other animators who are making similar things to you. Just go on to Animator Guild and check the tutorials. If you haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye. A very good animator called Michel Gagne, and he's made a few animations that are in this style of just translating the sounds